Hi everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps, and today I want to show you how to pick up stitches along the edge of your knitting. The instructions for this will sometimes just say pick up a certain number of stitches, or it might say pick up a certain number of stitches knitwise, or it might say pick up and knit whatever that number of stitches is. To pick up a stitch, basically you insert your needle where you want the stitch to be and you knit it just as though you were knitting off of a needle. So I insert my needle here, and if I'm doing it continental, I have my yarn coming off from the left hand and I just scoop the yarn through just like a continental knit stitch. Now if I want to do that English with the yarn in my other hand, I would still insert my needle wherever I want the stitch to be and then finish it like a knit stitch. Wrap the yarn around and scoop it through. And that's how you pick up a stitch. So how do you decide where you want your stitches to be? Well, in this case, I have 64 rows and I'm picking up 32 stitches. So that makes it very easy for me. This is garter stitch, so I just pick up one stitch every 2 rows, and what I'm doing is I'm picking up in between these garter ridges. If you don't have such a nice even math that you can just pick up one stitch for every 2 rows or something like that, you can use stitch markers to help mark where you want the stitches to be. So in this example, I have 32 stitches. If I put a marker at the halfway point in the middle of my piece, now I know that I'm picking up 16 stitches on this side and 16 stitches on this side. If I want to break that down a little more, I can place a couple more markers. There we go. And now I know I have to pick up 8 stitches here, 8 stitches here, 8 stitches here, and 8 stitches here. And then you can sort of eyeball it and say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and get them evenly spaced out. If you don't space them out evenly, you're going to end up with a big clump of stitches here and then all spread out over here, or you'll get this far and then realize suddenly that you need to make up some stitches so they'll all get clumped over here. Using the stitch markers helps you to make sure you're spreading things out more evenly. But like I said, in my case, I don't need stitch markers because I'm picking up one stitch every 2 rows. In my case, for this specific pattern, I'm starting with a stitch already on the needle, but you don't always have that. Sometimes you're going to be picking up stitches without anything on the needle. You're just going to be starting a whole new row. So if suppose I wanted to start picking up stitches here, well, what I would do is leave a tail and make a little loop and then just scoop that through for the first stitch. There we go. And that's my first stitch, and now I can continue on knitting like I normally would. Just go into the next spot and scoop up another stitch. And that first stitch is going to get floppy, but when you sew in the tail, it will be fixed. So that's how you start if you don't have a loop already on your needle. But in this case, I have a loop already on my needle, and I'm rotating and picking up along this side edge. Now, I'm doing that with the right side facing me because as I pick up the stitches, it's going to make a little bit of a seam that's going to get pushed to the back. Whatever I'm picking up, whatever's on top of my needle when I pick up a stitch, is going to get pushed to the back of the work. So if you look here, right there, you'll see the seam where I picked up stitches. I picked up these purple stitches, and there's this little bit of a seam here of the stitches that were remaining when I picked them up. That was where I picked up the stitches. So knowing that that's going to create a seam, it's very important that you pick up the stitches as close as possible to the edge, unless you're purposely trying to create a ridge. So in this case, I'm not putting my needle here after both loops of the stitch or anything like that. I'm going with just one loop as close as possible to the edge so that just that one loop ends up on the back and I get a much more seamless finish. So we're just going to go as close as possible to this edge and pick up these stitches. Oops, I keep splitting the yarn. Sorry about that. There we go. So I'll do the first half, I'm doing continental, so you can see how that looks, and I'm just going where I want the stitch to be and picking up a loop as close as possible to the edge. Now I'm going to work the rest of it English style so you can see that. You almost have to pretend like this hand and this piece of your work is your second needle. So you're inserting your hook into the stitch and doing your knit stitch like you normally would, as though this was just any other stitch on a needle. And then my very last one I'm putting right at the end, because for this pattern I want a nice straight edge along this side, so I want to make sure my stitch is as close as possible to the edge. And there you have it. That is how you pick up stitches. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, or leave me a comment. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great videos. Thanks for watching.